In the new issue of Metal Hammer, Clown looked back on Slipknot's iconic legacy as they're currently out on the road celebrating 25 years. He spoke about the shifting dynamic internally in the band, with the loss of beloved members like Paul, Joey, Chris, and Craig. It was a special time in the early days of Slipknot.
They collected dead birds in jars and breathed in the rotting stench before shows. They cut themselves with broken glass while recording naked. The drummer kept his own poop in Snapple bottles on the tour bus. This isn't fiction. This is Slipknot, the metal band that turned self-destruction into an art form. From nearly drowning in their own vomit to setting each other on fire, these aren't just rock stars. They're 9 men who pushed themselves beyond what any human should survive.
In the latest issue of Metal Hammer, Clown is opening up about the band's iconic legacy, and also he had some really heartfelt words to share about Paul and Joey, who of course he dearly misses, as well as the fans around the world. And he was very, very candid in this interview about the band's past and where they are today.
In the early 1990s, the local metal scene was chaotic. Musicians jumped from band to band, trying to find the right mix. Jim Root played guitar for Atomic Opera. Joey Jordison started a thrash band called Modifidius. One night in 1991, Modifidius opened for Atomic Opera. It was the first time future Slipknot members shared a stage, though none of them knew where things were heading. Sean Crahan, known later as Clown, had his own project called Heads on the Wall. Meanwhile, Anders Kolsefny, Paul Gray, and Josh Brainerd were playing death metal with a group called Vex. The metal scene in Des Moines was small but intense, and over the next few years, bands kept shifting. Gray started Body Pit in 1993 and brought in Mick Thompson. Joey Jordison almost joined, but didn't. Around the same time, Crahan, Kolsefny, Gray, and Patrick Newworth were jamming in a basement. They recorded a song called Slipknot. That moment, quiet, low-key, was the spark. The band didn't come together in a studio. It started in the back room of a Sinclair gas station, where one of them worked overnight shifts. After long days at regular jobs, the members met there at night. Over bad coffee and scratchy napkins, they imagined something bigger. That's where the name Slipknot stuck, taken from one of their early songs. It was a secret space. While customers came and went, the band talked about masks, music, and mayhem. It became their unofficial headquarters, humble, strange, and perfect for what they were building. But building something that intense takes more than dreams. In 1996, they decided to record an album. Crahan believed in the band so much that he put up $40,000 of his own money, most of it borrowed or charged to credit cards. They recorded Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat in Des Moines while living on instant noodles and scraping by on $20 a week. The budget was so tight that for years, even the band didn't own copies of the album. They only made 1,000. Slipknot handed them out to fans, radio stations, and record labels. Eventually, a small label stepped in to help with distribution. Years later, one of those original CDs sold for nearly $1,000, a strange reward for a sacrifice no one had forgotten. The recording sessions were rough, not just because of money. They clashed with the producer, Sean McMahon, a devout Christian who couldn't handle Slipknot's dark themes. He broke down multiple times in the studio. He thought the band was satanic. He even refused to record parts he believed were unholy. In the middle of this tension, guitarist Donnie Steele started missing rehearsals. The band had no idea why, until they found out he'd quietly quit. He felt the music went against his Christian beliefs. That sudden exit hit hard. Slipknot had to replace him fast, bringing in Craig Jones. Years later, Steele returned briefly after Paul Gray's death, but stayed hidden during shows, playing backstage out of sight. Crahan made the reason clear. Steele had left them once, and that trust never fully came back. Then came another shock, years after the band became famous. In 2024, Crahan said something that shook fans. Joey Jordison, long thought to be a founding member, actually wasn't. He explained that the original core was Anders Kolsefny, Paul Gray, and himself. Joey joined later. The timing of this reveal was tense, especially since Jordison's estate was suing the band over profits. But Crahan stood firm, pointing to his wedding years before Slipknot fully formed. Paul Gray had been there. Joey hadn't. A lot of the confusion came from the secrecy the band used early on. They wore masks. They used numbers instead of names. Even their Wikipedia page had the story wrong for years. Mick Thompson once described how the band had formed out of the ashes of two older groups. Everything was tangled, and Crahan was the center. Slipknot didn't start as 9 masked maniacs. In the beginning, they were a 6-piece band. That early lineup made their first album, but over time, members left. Kolsefny, Brainerd, and Steele were gone by 1999. In their place came Corey Taylor, Mick Thompson, Sid Wilson, Chris Fain, and eventually Jim Root. By the time the band reached its peak, there were 9 members, each with a number, a mask, and a role to play. That 9-man lineup stuck together for over a decade. The masks were never just costumes. They were keys, letting the band unlock something buried deep. It started with Crahan. In 1996, he found an old clown mask in his basement and wore it to practice. At first, the others laughed, but he wouldn't take it off. Eventually, they all joined him. The masks helped them perform without fear. They became animals on stage, free to be dark, twisted, and real. Corey Taylor once said, "You're transformed. You feel scary, evil, perverted, all in one mask." Each member had a different reason for wearing theirs. For Crahan, the clown mask had haunted him since he was a teenager. He didn't know why it mattered, only that it did. After his parents died, and after Paul Gray's death, the mask became his way to grieve, to scream, and to survive. In a rare moment of honesty, he admitted that therapy saved him. He'd created a hole and was drowning in it. In the summer of 2012, Slipknot played a show in Dallas that nearly ended in disaster. It was blazing hot, and the band used fire effects during their set. Corey Taylor, the lead singer, didn't realize how dangerous things had gotten. He blacked out during the last 2 songs. Somehow he kept performing. He had no memory of finishing the show. When he woke up backstage, he had an oxygen mask on his face. His bandmates and his wife were around him, clearly scared. Later, Corey explained what happened. The heat, the fire, and the bad airflow on stage had burned up most of the oxygen. He had passed out from a lack of air, but he had kept going, running on autopilot. That moment showed how far Slipknot was willing to go for a show, even if it nearly cost someone their life. But that wasn't the only time Slipknot pushed past the limits. In 2008, turntablist Sid Wilson broke both of his heels during the first night of a tour. He jumped off a platform and landed badly. It was the kind of injury that should have ended his tour right there. But Sid didn't quit. He showed up to the next show in a wheelchair, both legs in casts. And he kept performing. Night after night, he wheeled himself on stage, refusing to sit out. Fans were stunned. It became part of the Slipknot legend. Sid in a wheelchair, screaming into the mic, refusing to give up. Corey had his own long-term injury, too. In 2016, Slipknot had to delay their tour. Corey needed emergency surgery on his neck. The shocking part? He had broken his neck 17 years earlier and never realized it. It happened during Ozfest in 1999. He was just 24. He fell off the stage, landed on his head, and shook it off like it was nothing. For nearly 2 decades, he kept performing with a damaged spine. He kept headbanging, kept throwing himself around. He had no idea the injury was getting worse every year. By 2016, the damage was serious. Corey started feeling strange. He was getting electric shocks through his body. He was losing strength on one side. His balance was off. Worst of all, he had trouble controlling his bladder. Doctors ran some tests and were stunned. His vertebrae were crushed together. Bone was growing into his spinal cord. The doctor told him he had seen MMA fighters in better shape. Corey had surgery right away. They had to fix his spine, replace a disc, and cut away the bone. He was told recovery would take a year, but he didn't wait that long. He went back on stage as soon as he could. Stories like these aren't rare for Slipknot. Injuries are almost part of the act. The band wears them like medals. When Sean "Clown" Crahan tore his bicep by smashing a keg with a bat, the muscle rolled down his arm. People vomited when they saw it. But he kept going. During the recording of their album Iowa, Corey screamed into the mic while naked, cutting himself with broken glass and throwing up between takes. It wasn't just music, it was pain turned into art. There's a long list of injuries. Guitarist Mick Thompson got stabbed in the head and lived. Bassist Alessandro Venturella collapsed from dehydration during a show. Sid Wilson has hurt himself many times jumping off things. Each injury became a story. Each scar added to their legend. For Slipknot, the pain wasn't a problem. It was part of the performance. When Slipknot started working on their Iowa album in 2001, producer Ross Robinson had one goal: pull something raw and real out of the band, no matter what it took. He didn't just push them in the studio, he messed with their minds. He locked them in windowless rooms for days. He brought up their darkest memories. He even threw plants at them during recording. He wanted pain, chaos, and exhaustion because he believed that's where the best music lived. Corey Taylor, the band's singer, got it the worst. Robinson pushed him to his limits, again and again, until he broke down. The band later said the whole experience felt like trauma. But Robinson didn't back down. He said the suffering was worth it. He said it made the music real. And then, something even crazier happened. Just a few weeks into recording, Robinson broke his back in a dirt bike accident. A 75-foot jump went wrong. Doctors told him to rest. But the next day, he dragged himself into the studio, full of painkillers, barely able to move. He screamed through sessions, his pain echoing in the background of some tracks. He told the band, "If I can show up like this, you have no excuse." His broken body became part of the album. Years later, he said, "It still hurts. I still feel it." Meanwhile, Corey Taylor was falling apart. He was drinking heavily and spiraling. But the worst moment came when he recorded the title track, Iowa. He went into the vocal booth completely naked. He cut himself with broken glass. He vomited while screaming into the mic. No one could handle it. Even the producer stayed out of the room. One of the band members had to leave. Taylor later said he didn't care what happened to him. He just wanted to feel something. Anything. Because everything felt so bad. But he wasn't the only one struggling. Paul Gray, the band's bassist, was deep in a heroin addiction. Sometimes he'd disappear to the bathroom during recording and come back barely able to sit up. He was nodding off mid-take. The others were frustrated, but they also knew he was suffering. His girlfriend, who later became his wife, finally gave him an ultimatum, and he got clean. But the darkness never fully left. 9 years later, in 2010, Paul died of an overdose in a hotel room. That pain was already in the music. You can hear it in every note. Then came Sid Wilson. In January 2001, he found out his grandfather was dying. He raced to get home, but he was too late. When he came back to the studio, he was wrecked. Robinson told him to let it out in the booth. What happened next was a total breakdown. Sid screamed the word death over and over, losing control. They didn't edit any of it. That raw scream became the opening of the album. The band said it was one of the most honest things they ever recorded. But the pain didn't stop in the studio. During a live show at Ozfest, percussionist Sean "Clown" Crahan jumped into a barrel like he usually did during shows. But this time, it was half full of water, and he got stuck. For over 30 seconds, he was trapped underwater. He thought he was going to die. When he finally got out, gasping and spitting water, his wife gave him a warning. "If you die, you're just going to be some guy in a book somewhere." It shook him. Years later, Sid Wilson had another brush with death. In 2024, while burning wood at his farm, he poured gasoline onto hot ashes. When he tried to light the pile, it exploded in his face. The blast burned off his eyebrows, melted the skin on his arms, and nearly destroyed his face. He ended up in the hospital, covered in blisters. But just weeks later, he swore he'd be back on stage. "I always find a way," he said. And he did. Slipknot's look has always been part of their legend. The masks, the jumpsuits, the chaos. But it's taken a brutal toll. The masks are suffocating. The suits are heavy. Corey Taylor once blacked out from heat exhaustion during a show and woke up backstage with an oxygen mask. Sean Crahan developed severe tendinitis and carpal tunnel from smashing metal barrels every night. "The vibration has to go somewhere," he said. "It goes up my arm." Even the fire wasn't safe. The band loved using pyrotechnics, but it often went wrong. One time, they hired an unlicensed guy to set it all up. He packed the explosives in a hot truck and set the flames way too close to the crowd. During that show, the fire actually hit the PA system, almost causing an explosion. Corey Taylor and another bandmate had to beat out the flames with towels. Another time in Phoenix, the fans made their own bonfire, throwing chairs and trash into it while dancing in a circle. The fire got so big, the band had to stop the show so firefighters could put it out. Slipknot wasn't just wild on stage. They were complete chaos off it, too. Their 2001 European tour is the stuff of legend. The band was on a ferry with another metal group, American Head Charge, and things got out of hand fast. Their stage manager passed out at the bar. Instead of waking him up like normal people, the band decided to set his legs on fire. Corey Taylor later said, "He wouldn't wake up, so we set his legs on fire. We put it out, but the damage was done." That moment summed up the band's early days. Reckless, dangerous, and totally out of control. It wasn't just boats where things got crazy. One night at a tiny venue, no one can quite remember if it was in Reno or Provo, the band saw the stage and immediately got angry. It was made of cheap plywood and shaped like an L. In the middle of the show, one of them jumped and crashed straight through it. That was all it took. The band lost it. They started smashing everything: kegs, guitars, anything they could grab. Then they set the whole thing on fire. When it was done, there was a giant hole in the stage, smoke in the air, and the band running out without their gear. It was destruction for destruction's sake, and no one who saw it forgot it. But maybe the most disgusting part of early Slipknot came from Clown. He had a habit so vile that even his bandmates couldn't handle it. He collected his own bodily waste in Snapple bottles and kept them on the tour bus. The smell alone made people gag. Sometimes during shows, he would smear the stuff on his mask just to freak out the crowd and his own band. It got so bad that they threatened to quit if he didn't stop. But to Clown, that shock and disgust were part of the act. He wanted the audience to feel uncomfortable. He wanted them to leave the show disturbed. And just when you think it couldn't get weirder, there was the time Chris Fenn Sleep walked in the middle of the night and peed on Sid Wilson. They were sharing a room. Fenn got up, walked over to Sid's bed, and relieved himself right on top of him, then went back to sleep like nothing happened. The next morning, Sid was furious, but Fenn didn't even remember doing it. That story lived on in band interviews for years, a symbol of how the non-stop touring, the partying, and the sheer madness of Slipknot life could mess with your mind. It all started on September 11, 1999, when Slipknot played a show in Cleveland, Mushroomhead's hometown. Things quickly spiraled out of control. As Slipknot took the stage, the crowd turned hostile. People started throwing padlocks, batteries, anything dangerous they could find. Then it got worse. Someone hurled a padlock the size of a fist and hit bassist Paul Gray right in the face. That was the breaking point. Percussionist Clown, guitarist Jim Root, and others jumped into the crowd, fists flying. They weren't about to back down. Security rushed in to stop the fight, while frontman Corey Taylor tried to calm the chaos, yelling, "Do you want to see a fight? Or do you want to see a fucking show, man?" But it was too late. The damage was done. That night became one of the most violent and unforgettable moments in Slipknot's history. The chaos didn't end with the show. As Slipknot's crew tried to get things under control, police arrived. One crew member got maced right in the face. He was arrested on the spot. Slipknot later recalled that as soon as the set was over, all hell broke loose backstage. What started as a band rivalry had now turned into something much bigger. The police were involved, arrests were made, and Slipknot's name was tied to one of the wildest scenes in nu metal history. But the fighting wasn't just with outsiders. Sometimes, Slipknot turned on each other. At a meet and greet, a fan gave Corey Taylor a rare comic book he had been searching for. Turntablist Sid Wilson thought it would be funny to slap it out of his hands. It wasn't. That small prank sparked a massive fight between the two. They went at each other so hard that the rest of the band had to pull them apart. Sid threatened to leave the tour. Corey refused to apologize. Years later, Corey looked back and called it one of the most evil moments of his life. But time heals. In 2016, after Corey had spinal surgery, Sid was the first to call. They finally apologized. The fight that almost ended them became part of what brought them back together. Violence even followed them off stage. On March 11, 2015, guitarist Mick Thompson got into a drunken fight with his own brother, Andrew. It happened just after 4 in the morning at Mick's home in Iowa. The argument spilled outside and turned into a knife fight. When police arrived, they found both brothers wounded and still holding knives. Mick had been stabbed in the back of the head. Ambulances rushed them to separate hospitals. Luckily, neither injury was life-threatening. No charges were filed, and the band's manager made it clear Mick would still be playing the next tour. In Slipknot's early days, Sean "Clown" Crahan kept a dead crow in a jar. The bird had been in there so long it started turning into a thick, smelly goo. Before shows, Clown would open the jar, and the band would take deep breaths of the horrible fumes. DJ Sid Wilson said it made you throw up instantly, right inside your mask. But that was the point. They wanted to know what death smelled like. It was part of getting into the dark headspace they felt they needed for their performances. The worse it got, the better it worked. At one show, some fans actually asked to try it themselves. Shockingly, a few even tasted the mixture. The band was more disturbed by the fans than the fans were by the jar. Clown's relationship with death didn't stop there. At home, he kept pieces of his father's skull in a box under a desk. While most people hold on to things like photos or old clothes to remember loved ones, Clown went much further. To him, the bones were a way to stay close to his father, real and raw. It fit perfectly with how he viewed art. Death wasn't something to avoid or clean up. It was something to face, to touch, and even to use. That kind of thinking came with real danger. During one show, Clown almost died. He had thrown up inside his mask and nearly drowned in it. The band's masks were more than just costumes. They were suffocating, hot, and hard to see through. But they kept wearing them, no matter what. It was all part of staying inside that world they had created, where pain and danger were just part of the job. Recording their album Iowa took that darkness to another level. Between takes, the band watched violent videos of people dying and graphic pornography. It wasn't for fun. It was part of their process. They believed it kept them in the right mental state to make the music they wanted. Their producer, who was Christian, thought they were satanic. And maybe he wasn't wrong to be scared. At the time, frontman Corey Taylor was self-harming in the studio. He said he was bleeding everywhere, just trying to feel something. That album was brutal, both in sound and in what it did to them. Corey would later say it was an amazing album, but it came at a price. Still, the band didn't see any of this as a problem. They believed all of it. The pain, the filth, the violence was necessary for the art. Clown once said he felt like he had artistic schizophrenia, like his clown persona was a separate part of him. That other side allowed him to dive into dark thoughts and feelings he couldn't show in real life. Everything they did, even the most twisted stuff, was explained as part of that process. Sid Wilson once said the bird jar helped them get into that dark place. Clown even said their fans, whom they called maggots, fed on the pain in the music, hoping it would help them escape their own. It was all part of the same world, brutal, honest, and terrifying. But somehow, they made it work. But not everyone saw it that way. In 2008, in South Africa, a student named Morne Harmse walked into his school wearing a mask like the ones Slipknot wore. He had a samurai sword. He attacked 4 people, killing 1 student and seriously injuring 3 others. When police arrested him, they found 2 more masks in his bag, one that looked like Clown's. He later said he just wanted to feel what it was like to kill. The connection to Slipknot was impossible to ignore. The masks weren't just masks anymore. For some people, they became something darker. A different kind of betrayal happened inside the band in 2019. After more than 2 decades with Slipknot, percussionist Chris Fenn filed a lawsuit. He said he had just found out that certain members, mainly Corey Taylor and Clown, had set up extra companies to collect money from touring and merch behind his back. He had always believed the profits were shared equally. Now, he felt cheated. Their business manager, Rob Shore, said Fenn was never a full partner, just a hired hand. The lawsuit named multiple companies and shocked fans. Suddenly, the brotherhood of Slipknot didn't look so solid. Corey Taylor was furious. He went straight to Twitter, calling the claims bullshit and telling fans to wait for the truth. He said being accused of stealing from someone he cared about was one of the worst things he'd ever experienced. Days later, Slipknot announced Fenn was out. They didn't say much, just that Chris knew why he was gone. At first, it looked like the lawsuit might go to court. But by October 2020, Ben dropped the case. No one knows what the settlement included, but the damage had been done. Another bond inside the band was broken. It wasn't the first time Slipknot had gone to court. Back in 2005, Burger King launched a new ad campaign for chicken fries using a fake masked band called Cock Rock. Slipknot saw the masks and the stage setup and said it was obvious. Burger King had ripped them off. They sued for trademark infringement. Burger King hit back, saying Slipknot wasn't original either, claiming they were just a mix of Kiss, Gwar, and other masked bands. In the end, both sides dropped the lawsuits. The ads ran their course, but the whole thing left a bitter taste. A different controversy hit in 2016. Gawker published an article linking Slipknot to white supremacy. They ran a video of a shirtless Trump supporter yelling hate speech and claimed, "This is what listens to Slipknot." Corey Taylor didn't hold back. He called out the writer on Twitter, saying the article was full of lazy stereotypes and had nothing to do with who they were. Gawker's editor later apologized and edited the story. But the damage was real. Corey said it hurt to see his band, which had fans from all backgrounds, painted that way. No matter how loud he spoke up, people still tried to put them in a box.